We're going to talk about tritones, what they are, how we might use them, identify them. This is a loose definition of them. To my mind, a tritone will split the octave right in two. Visually, we'll get to that in a second, but theoretically as well. We have before us here a chromatic scale. You see I've written the word tone. When we use the word tone, we're just meaning a whole step. So tritone means 3 whole steps. If I travel 3 whole steps from A, as I have begun here with A, 1, 2, 3, I wind up on a D sharp. If I travel from D sharp 3 whole steps, or 3 tones away, 1, 2, 3, I wind up at A. This is what we mean by it theoretically splitting the octave, right in the middle. 3 whole steps to one side, you'll find an A. 3 whole steps to the other, we'll find an A. The tritone substitution is perhaps one of the most common substitutions in jazz. Very, very common in what we would refer to, or what is referred to as a 2-5-1. A tritone substitution, I'll say this, is usually, or I'll say it's always, and I'll put that word always in quotes because there's always an exception. It's always a dominant chord being substituted for another dominant chord. So I'm throwing a bunch of stuff around here, terms like dominant chords, and not fully explaining them. So if there are any questions, just leave them in the comment box. But really our purpose today is just to talk about what a tritone is and what a tritone substitution is. So it's a dominant chord, the substitution part of it, a dominant chord being substituted for another dominant chord. When I say that, what I mean to say is you typically would not entertain the idea of a tritone substitution for any other type of chord than a dominant chord. There are exceptions, but let's just say that for the time being. So let's say I'm looking at a jazz standard here. Here's one, right on cue. And I see B flat minor 7 to E flat 7. If I can pan down here a little bit, pan up. We see how it resolves. There's the one chord. B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A flat major 7. 2-5-1. This is the point we're talking about as a chord player, or later on as an improviser, where we might entertain the idea of a tritone sub. We were looking at what would be a substitution, or what would be a tritone sub or a tritone of A. We came to the conclusion that it's D sharp. D sharp is another way of saying E flat. There's a fancy word for that. Okay. So here's E flat 7. All right. So we're going to assume that this works the other way. It's very mathematical, or so I'm told. Music is very mathematical. The E flat 7 will be a substitution for A7 when we're talking about a tritone, and the opposite is true. A7 will be a substitute for E flat. So all of this is to say that if I wanted to employ a tritone substitution in this particular standard, in this particular place, I would play A7 rather than E flat 7. Now, that's perhaps a topic of discussion for another video. There's a reason why it works that we can get into later. But that's the essence of what a tritone is, and at least the initial start into how we would use it as chord players and later on as improvisers. Okay, thanks.